The studio was alive with a buzzing tension even before the red, on-air, light blinked on. Rows of audience members leaned forward in their seats, their eyes bouncing between the two chairs center stage, one occupied by Oprah Winfrey, draped in a flowing blue silk blouse, the other by Denzel Washington, suit jacket unbuttoned, hands clasped loosely, but his gaze razor-sharp. Between them sat the moderator, a man who clearly knew he was sitting in the middle of a brewing storm. Oprah had just finished recounting a story about a woman she'd met on one of her philanthropic trips abroad. Her voice was calm, measured, almost soothing, as she leaned into the microphone. "I've always believed that there are many paths to God, to heaven," she said, her words floating in the quiet air. "Christianity is one way, yes, but love, kindness, and openness, these are also paths that lead there." The audience hummed with murmurs, some nodding, others exchanging skeptical glances. The moderator smiled, ready to move on to the next question. But Denzel's posture changed. He leaned forward slowly, his hands now gripping the arms of his chair. His expression carried no smile, only an intensity that made the room shift. "Oprah," he began, his deep voice cutting through the air, "truth isn't a buffet where you get to pick and choose what feels good." The sudden firmness in his tone silenced the scattered whispers. "If you call yourself a Christian, there's only one path that book talks about. You don't get to rewrite it for ratings or applause." The moderator blinked, unsure whether to intervene, but Oprah straightened in her seat, her eyes locking on Denzel. "Denzel, my faith is personal. My relationship with God is mine." "No," he interrupted, the edge in his voice sharpening. "When you speak on a platform like this, it's not just yours anymore. You're shaping what millions believe about eternity. That's not a light thing to play with." The audience gasped. A woman in the third row shook her head, another clapped once, quickly stopping when she realized the room was holding its breath. Oprah's fingers tightened on the armrest, the light above catching the gleam in her eyes, not of fear, but defiance. "So what are you saying?" she asked, her voice lower now, testing him. Denzel didn't flinch. "I'm saying truth doesn't bend to fit your brand. Either you believe what's written, or you don't. But don't stand here calling it the truth while selling a softer version so everyone feels comfortable." It was the kind of silence that makes even the cameras seem hesitant to move. Oprah froze for a moment at Denzel's words. The studio, already tense, seemed to hold its breath. The quiet hum of the cameras was the only sound in the room. Then, she slowly smiled, but it wasn't the warm, talk show smile she was known for. It was tight, controlled, masking a flicker of irritation. "Denzel," she said softly, almost with a hint of patience, "I understand your faith. I respect it. But people can find God in different ways. That diversity, that's the beauty of belief." Denzel shook his head, leaning closer to the mic. His voice was calm, but every word carried weight. "Oprah, that's exactly where you're wrong. This isn't about personal preference. If faith becomes a free market where everyone gets to invent their own path, then truth stops meaning anything. Faith is rooted in reality. And that reality," he paused, scanning the audience, "only goes through one road." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded along with Denzel, their eyes locked on him like he was saying what they'd been thinking for years. Others crossed their arms, shifting uncomfortably, their lips tightening in quiet disapproval. The air was thick with the kind of tension you could almost touch. From the control booth, the producer glanced nervously at the clock. The segment had barely started, and it was already spiraling into dangerous territory. This wasn't a friendly exchange anymore, it was a battle of convictions being fought live, in front of millions. Oprah leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs with deliberate slowness. "So what you're saying," she replied, eyes narrowing, "is that billions of people around the world are wrong, simply because they don't walk your road?" Denzel didn't blink. "I'm saying," he countered, "truth doesn't bend to opinion, not even yours." The audience erupted in a wave of gasps and scattered applause. Some clapped boldly, others hesitated, as if afraid to be seen taking a side. The moderator, who had been reduced to little more than a spectator, cleared his throat and tried to speak, but the energy between Denzel and Oprah was electric, neither of them was letting go. Oprah leaned forward now, her tone sharper, the warmth stripped away. Denzel, you act as if your interpretation is the only valid one. Faith is lived. It's personal. It's not something you can dictate to others. Denzel's eyes didn't waver. Faith isn't a matter of interpretation when the foundation is clear. You can't call yourself a Christian and then tell people there are other roads to the same destination. That's not what the book says, Oprah. And when you stand here, with your influence, and say it anyway, you're not just sharing an opinion. You're misleading people. The crowd reacted instantly, a pocket of loud applause on one side, a few audible boos on the other. A man in the back shouted, "Let her speak," while another fired back, "He's right." The room was splitting in real time. Oprah's jaw tightened. I have built my career on lifting people up, not tearing them down. And I will not stand here and pretend that kindness and compassion are worthless unless they fit your definition of God's path. Denzel leaned in so close to the mic that his voice seemed to fill the entire room. Kindness without truth is a lie wrapped in a smile. And it's the easiest way to lead people away from what they need to hear. For a moment, no one moved. Even the cameraman seemed glued to the scene, afraid to miss a second. This wasn't just an interview anymore, it was a collision of two worlds, two visions of eternity, playing out in front of millions. The moderator finally raised his hand, but both of them ignored him. The next words out of either mouth could tip the entire audience, and the internet, to one side. Woman in the front row suddenly stood up, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Oprah's right. God loves everyone, no matter the path. The audience erupted again, half clapping, half shouting back. The studio, once a polished stage for celebrity interviews, now felt like a courtroom where the verdict was still up in the air. Denzel turned his head toward the woman, his expression steady but unflinching. God's love isn't the question. The question is whether you're willing to follow the truth he laid out, or rewrite it to make yourself comfortable. The woman sat down slowly, shaking her head, while another voice from the back yelled, "Let him talk." Camera operators swung their lenses back and forth, trying to catch every flash of emotion. Oprah straightened in her seat, her hands clasped tightly together. Denzel, I know you believe you're defending the truth. But faith has carried me through every challenge in my life, not because I walked your road, but because I trusted God to guide mine. You can't take that away from me or from anyone watching. Denzel's reply came without hesitation. Oprah, you've inspired millions, I won't deny that. But inspiration without direction can send people over a cliff. And when you blur the lines about something as absolute as salvation, you're not guiding them toward God. You're guiding them toward confusion. Gasps filled the air. The moderator's eyes darted to the producer's booth. He was getting the signal to cut to commercial, but no one dared to interrupt. The ratings must have been skyrocketing. This was the kind of unfiltered confrontation that would be replayed for weeks. Oprah leaned forward again, her voice low but cutting. Maybe the problem isn't that my path is too wide, Denzel. Maybe yours is too narrow. The words hung in the air, sharp as broken glass. Denzel didn't break eye contact. The audience leaned in, waiting for his next move. Denzel's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smirk, not one of amusement, but of resolve. He leaned toward the mic, his voice deep, resonant, and unshakable. Oprah, truth isn't narrow. It's precise. A surgeon's scalpel is precise. A compass pointing north is precise. You don't call it narrow when it saves your life. You call it right. The audience roared, some clapping, some booing, the sound crashing together into a wall of noise. The moderator tried again to step in, but it was as if the two were locked in a private battle, using the crowd only as fuel. Oprah held his gaze, her face unreadable, but the tightness in her jaw betrayed the weight of his words. You speak as if your truth is universal, she replied, her voice steady but edged with fire. But the moment you close the door to others' experiences, you turn faith into a weapon. Denzel didn't flinch. Faith is a weapon, against lies. Against the darkness that tells people they can build their own ladders to heaven. I'm not here to comfort people with half-truths, Oprah. I'm here to give them the whole thing, even if it cuts. Gasps rippled through the audience. A man in the second row shouted, "Tell it, Denzel," while a woman next to him yelled, "That's not love." The clash of voices was almost as intense as the one on stage. Oprah leaned forward, her tone shifting, almost pleading now. "And what about grace, Denzel? What about the God who meets people where they are?" Denzel's eyes softened for just a fraction of a second before hardening again. "Grace meets you where you are," he said slowly, "but it doesn't leave you there." The studio went silent, not because the fight was over, but because everyone knew it was far from it. The energy was volcanic, and the next exchange could blow the roof off the place. Before Oprah could respond, the silence shattered. Someone's phone in the audience began blaring a live stream notification. The big screen in the corner, meant for audience engagement, suddenly lit up with live tweets and comments pouring in. "Denzel just schooled Oprah. Oprah's defending inclusion, why's that bad? This is the debate we've been needing." The moderator shot a panicked look toward the control booth, but the producer gave a small nod. They were letting the feed run. The world was now in the room. Oprah glanced at the screen, reading the comments in real time, then turned back to Denzel. "You see? People are listening. They're thinking for themselves. That's the point, not to hand them one answer, but to give them the freedom to find their own." Denzel's voice cut through the air, low and deliberate. "Freedom without truth is a cage without bars. It feels open, until you realize you're not going anywhere." A collective "who" rippled through the crowd. Some audience members shifted uncomfortably, others nodded with approval. Oprah, unfazed, leaned back in her chair and crossed her legs, projecting calm in the face of his intensity. "So you think anyone who doesn't follow your exact path is lost?" she pressed, her tone pushing for the soundbite that would dominate headlines. Denzel didn't hesitate. "I think anyone who ignores the map and still expects to arrive will be disappointed. And if you hand them a false map, you share the blame." The room exploded again, clapping, shouts, murmurs. The camera zoomed in tight on their faces, catching every flicker of emotion. The moderator raised his voice over the noise. "All right, we need to." But Denzel raised his hand slightly, cutting him off without looking away from Oprah. "You brought this topic here, Oprah. Let's finish it here." Oprah's eyes narrowed, but there was a spark. She wasn't walking away either. The stage was now a battlefield, and neither was willing to retreat. Oprah shifted forward, resting her elbows on her knees, her voice now carrying the weight of lived experience. "Denzel, I've been in places where faith was the only thing holding people together. Villages with no electricity, women raising children alone, communities surviving war and famine, and they didn't know your version of the truth. But they had hope, and they had God." The audience listened intently, the noise fading into a tense quiet. A few heads nodded, clearly moved by her imagery. Denzel let her finish without interruption, but his jaw was set. When he spoke, it was like a gavel hitting the bench. "Hope without truth is a mirage, Oprah. It looks like it's saving you until you realize you've been walking in circles in the desert. I'm not here to disrespect the people you're talking about. I'm here to say that if we love them, truly love them, we owe them more than just comfort, we owe them clarity." A man in the back called out, "Amen," while someone else countered with, "You can't judge their hearts." The split was widening. Oprah's tone sharpened. "Clarity or control, Denzel? Because sometimes what you call truth is just your way of keeping others in line." That line hit hard, the audience reacted with gasps and murmurs. Denzel leaned in, eyes locked on hers. "Control is when you tell people all roads lead home, even when you know some of them end in cliffs. I'd rather be hated for warning them than loved for lying." The moderator looked as if he wanted to cut in, but the producer's voice crackled over the earpiece. Let it play out, we've never had engagement like this. Oprah exhaled, a faint, almost disbelieving smile on her lips. You really believe you're the one man standing between the world and ruin? Denzel didn't blink. Not the only one. But I refuse to be the one who stayed silent. The crowd roared again, the tension now a living thing in the room, the tension snapped like a live wire. The crowd's reactions were no longer contained to murmurs, people were standing, pointing, arguing across aisles. Security shifted uncomfortably along the walls, watching for the moment the verbal firestorm might turn physical. Oprah, feeling the swell of energy in the room, raised her hand for quiet. The noise dipped just enough for her to speak. Denzel, you talk about silence like it's a sin. But sometimes silence is humility. Sometimes silence is leaving space for someone else's journey. Denzel's chair creaked as he leaned forward, his voice dropping low enough that the microphones had to work to catch it, a choice that made everyone lean in. Oprah, there's a time for silence, and there's a time for a shout that rattles the gates. Right now, the gates are wide open, and people are walking straight into the dark. The audience erupted again, applause and shouts mixing with boos. A woman near the front shouted, "Let people live their truth," while another fired back, "Truth isn't yours to edit." Oprah's tone hardened, the warmth from earlier gone. And who appointed you the gatekeeper, Denzel? Who told you your voice is the one that should rise above all others? Denzel didn't hesitate. Nobody appointed me. But when you've seen the fire, when you've pulled people out, you don't wait for a title. You just act. The moderator, now visibly sweating, tried once more. We need to. But the words were swallowed by the roar of the crowd as a live poll appeared on the screen, fed by viewers voting online. Who's right? The bar graph jumped in real time, Denzel 51%, Oprah 49%. The margin was razor thin, and every cheer or boo seemed to tip the scale one way or the other. Oprah glanced at the numbers, then back at Denzel with a look that was equal parts challenge and intrigue. Looks like the people are split. So tell me, Denzel, what's your next move? Denzel sat back slowly, the hint of a knowing smile crossing his face. To finish what we started. The audience's noise swelled again, the air electric, as if something irreversible was about to be said. The tension in the studio was like a taut wire, every word felt like it could snap it. Oprah leaned forward, her voice calm but edged. Denzel, you're making this about me. This is bigger than one person's belief. People have their own paths, their own truths. Denzel's eyes narrowed, but he didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to. Oprah, when you put your name behind something, it's no longer just your truth. It becomes a brand. And right now, you're branding God as a buffet. Pick what you like, leave what you don't. That's not faith. That's marketing. The audience reacted audibly, some gasped, some clapped, others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The live chat feed on the screen behind them was a storm of comments, half calling Denzel brave, half calling him judgmental. Oprah crossed her arms, tilting her head. So you think your way is the only way? I think God's way is the only way, Denzel shot back. And we don't get to rewrite the map because it makes us feel better. The host tried to cut in, but the exchange was moving too fast. Cameras zoomed closer, framing the two like boxers in a verbal championship match. Oprah's tone sharpened, you're shutting people out, people who might never step into a church because of that kind of talk. Denzel leaned in, his voice low but slicing through the air, and you're lulling them into thinking they don't need to. You're not leading them to God, you're leading them to you. The room fell silent, even the air felt heavier. The host looked from one to the other, unsure whether to wrap it up or let the moment breathe. The audience was hooked, nobody knew who would land the final blow. The host finally cleared his throat. All right, final thoughts before we close. But Denzel wasn't done. He looked straight into the camera, bypassing Oprah entirely. Faith isn't a mood. It isn't a brand. And it isn't a feel-good slogan you put on a coffee mug. It's truth. And truth doesn't bend just because culture does. Oprah straightened in her seat, visibly frustrated. And what gives you the authority to speak for God, Denzel? He turned to her, his gaze steady. Nothing. I'm not speaking for God. I'm reminding people what he already said. The audience erupted, half in applause, half in protest. The host scrambled to close the show, but the camera lingered on the two of them. Oprah sat back, her jaw tight, clearly calculating her next move. Denzel, on the other hand, seemed calm, almost too calm. You want to inspire people, he said, still looking at her. Stop making faith about comfort. Start making it about commitment. The credits started to roll, but the mic still caught Oprah muttering, "You just don't get it." Denzel's final words, quiet but sharp, cut through even as the lights dimmed. "No, I just refuse to change it." The screen faded to black, but the debate was already spilling onto every corner of social media. Clips of the exchange were being replayed, dissected, and turned into headlines within minutes. For viewers, it wasn't just a TV moment, it was a cultural fault line, and Denzel had just stomped right on it.